I'm really excited about today's episode because we're talking to our friend Josie, who...
She's awesome.
She is really awesome. She is, I don't know, like everything yoga, and she kind of goes in greater depth into like what that means, that she's not just teaching like the physical practice of yoga, but there's like so much more to that.
Yeah.
We talk about her journey from doing hair for a living to getting into yoga and getting interested in it, and then
exiting that studio that she helped start, and how she worked through and processed that transition, what was easy or difficult about some of those things, why she did it.
Yeah. I really loved just talking about how you don't always have to be doing the same thing all the time. And she even speaks to, like, talking about what she wants to do in 5 years isn't even something that really interests her. And some people will resonate with it, some people won't. But giving yourself permission to change the course of your life, I think, is what's really inspiring. And then we talk about how that actually looked selling her yoga studio and finding the person who was perfect to replace her in those duties and to lead the studio in the same direction. Yeah. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a lot. This episode felt like one of those times where our guests could talk forever and ever, and we would have just loved listening to them.
We actually had a little bit of a difficult time because as she was telling stories, you and I got a little bit lost, like, as participants or as people.
So
just
then we had
listening
like no questions to follow up.
There's
like, oh, that's awesome.
You can't see this in the podcast, but maybe you can hear it. But Allie and I just look at each other like, do you have a question? Because I was just paying attention.
Yeah, which is good. It's like that mindfulness and being present. And it was great. Josie, this is one of the episodes where we got to actually sit with someone in our studio and talk. Some of the episodes we released this season are, with people out of town and over Skype. And it was just great to sit down and hang out.
Yeah. She's awesome.
Yep. So enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Wonder Jam Cast, Season 2, episode number... I don't know what episode number this is.
Yeah, I don't know.
4-ish?
Maybe.
3, 4, or 5. Probably, for sure.
Josie, tell us who you are. It's a deep question.
Ooh, yeah. In what way?
Content.
Let's just talk about mainly professionally, what do you do? Because most of the people who listen to this are people who are excited about starting their own business and things like that. Yeah. So talk a little bit about your experience with starting a business, whatever.
Yeah.
So, right now I teach yoga in many forms, I would say. So I teach open classes, I teach one-on-one sessions, workshops, I travel to other studios. A lot of times it ends up being with their teacher training. So I guest teacher, it's like a guest teacher spot in their teacher trainings. Okay. And then I lead my own teacher trainings. And then
here in Columbus.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's kind of what
and
I
meditation.
do.
You'll work with even other businesses
and all that kind of stuff. So.
If there's a small business and you came in and walked their team through meditation.
Like you guys.
Yeah.
Like you do for us.
It's pretty great. Yeah. But I think that it's cool to then let's jump back and talk about what you did before this that was very connected and similar, but yet very different. So talk about opening Think Yoga Studio.
So what do you want to know about opening Think Yoga? Why or just the process?
Yeah, talk us through timeline. When
just explain to the listeners, because there's probably, we know it, but there's probably people who don't know what you did or have done.
Yeah.
So before I opened Think Yoga, I was a hairstylist for many years. And I developed a yoga practice, and then it kind of consumed me. So once I started practicing more and more, I fell in love with it, started teaching not for the money because I absolutely loved it because you got paid really crappy. Yeah. I don't know, some places it was $15 a class.
Oh, wow.
Some places it was $25, and that was the shit.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I can actually buy a North Star.
Yeah.
So obviously it wasn't for the money. I loved it, but I found that I was doing hair full time and then teaching I think 12 classes a week at one point, or 15. I was just anybody that wants a sub, and I would just make it happen. If there was a sub, because at one point I was teaching at about 5 studios, and I'm jumping the gun on when I started teaching too, because that's a whole other story. But I was teaching at about 5 studios, hair full time. I had my own hair business. And I would like get up, do a bunch of hair, close out my books for 2 hours, run across town in traffic to go teach this one class at this random gym, like for $15, come back, stay till like 9:30 at night. And I just loved doing it so much. So I was like, what? And then people around me were kind of like, do you think about doing this full time? And like, to be honest, absolutely. Yes, I thought about doing it full time. I thought about that from the minute I was in my teacher training, but it was like scary to think like, what if I sucked at it? How could I make this my living?
Yeah.
So once I decided like, I want to make this my living, I knew I couldn't do it by just solely teaching classes. Like I wasn't going to be financially stable enough to the way that like my expectations were financially. So I thought about opening a studio, and that was terrifying. But for some reason, the excitement outweighed the fear.
Yeah.
So I was only a year into teaching when I opened Think. I just like jumped into it.
Yeah.
So.
And the space that exists now is Think Yoga Studios. So I keep saying it, studio. Was that the space that you opened? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I was searching for. I actually started searching the minute I got back from my first teacher training before I taught my first class.
That's
I was
amazing.
searching online. I run, so I would literally run by like places, see a number in the window, take a photo of it, call them later, just to get an idea of like how much it would be, so I could start to mentally be like, could I even do this?
Yeah.
And then when I got back from my second training and I knew that I was going to do it, it was like within a week I found a place when I was on a run, called them, saw the place, signed the lease.
Yeah.
So when I opened, I still had my hair business, and it was just me teaching.
Okay.
I brought on one person at first, but it was so slow in the beginning, like the first month. Yeah. And I opened in June, which is like the slowest month of any kind of like fitness. Yeah. And I don't think of yoga as fitness, but you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of people do. So in that world, like people want to be outside, especially in Columbus. So it was very slow. So I was still doing hair full time.
Okay.
And running the business, opening for classes.
Were you still teaching
every class?
Everywhere. Were you teaching anywhere else?
No, I told the people, once I knew, I told the studios, I let them know, like, I'm going to be doing my thing, and they were super cool about it. Yeah. Of course, I wasn't, like, telling my classes, like, come find me. But, you know, it was social media, so people are smart, and they found me. And I wasn't trying to steal people away. It was just, like, if you want to find me, they're going to find me. So that's what happened. But... yeah, so I was like crazy that first year because I was still running my business and the studio. Eventually, I brought in one person pretty soon after I opened. I forget. Actually, it might have been right at first. I honestly forget.
Yeah, it does. It like all fuses together.
It was a doozy that year. And then another person, and then I went back. Like I went to like 4 days doing hair, 3, 2, 1, and then I had to. I think it was like 6 months into the studio, 6 or 9 months.
Yeah. Stop doing hair.
Is when I stopped. Yeah. I was like, I can't do both. Because at first I thought I wanted to. Yeah. Because it was that security blanket. Yeah. And I realized very soon, I was like, the only reason I'm doing this is for the money at this point. Yeah. So I have to let it go and just like trust. And as soon as I did that, like it just opened up so much more space and energy for me to give into the studio and what I was doing.
So walk back to...
Was that really long?
No, it was great. Okay. Can you make your story shorter?
I actually could have gone for like another hour.
Yeah, right?
People say they love this podcast because it's like very vague and has no details of people's story. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's... no, it's fascinating. Go back to what made you obsessed with yoga, or how did you get into it? I would imagine that there's some people listening to this who maybe aren't that into a practice yet, or maybe haven't even gone to a class somewhere before. Like, how did you find your way in there?
So I'll date myself. I'm 33. So 15 years ago in high school, there was like no studios around here, especially in Columbus. But my oldest sister, she is like a total weirdo. Did a lot of acid in high school, so she like opened my eyes to like this other world, right? Yeah. So she was into yoga. Met her. She was into that kind of stuff, but when I was in high school, I was more into like running.
More traditional stuff.
I needed like a good sweat, but I was still open to like weird shit. Yeah. So me and my friend, I remember me and my friend Brittany Johnson, who I'm still friends with today, we found this like donation class that was actually in like a basement somewhere in Clintonville, which is now underneath Balanced Yoga.
Oh,
but it was random. We go down in there and there was just like a bunch of like weirdos, and we like put our money in this basket. We had our first yoga class, and like I just wasn't ready for it. Like I remember being like, I liked whatever just happened, but I was too, I think, immature and not like open-minded enough to like want that style of yoga.
Yeah.
So it took a little while. I did another like beginner series at Yoga on High, which is like my first beginner series years ago because my sister was practicing there. And I just remember hating it because I was looking at the clock the whole time. They had a clock in the room, which is, I was like, that's not, I hate that.
Because you're like aware of time.
I hated it then. It's fine now because I don't care. But then all I was doing was like hoping that it was done.
Yeah.
Especially towards the end. I was just like, can we get the fuck out
I understand because when you have come in with our team and you have us hold things that we're not comfortable in, I'm just excited for that pose to get over.
Yeah, it took a long time for me to like want to do that. And this was like a slower style too and more spiritual practice where I needed something that was going to kick my ass. So fast forward a few years later, I was training for my first half marathon. So I was always a runner, but then I decided to like start being even more weird and doing those. So one of my clients from hair was like, you should try, I think it was like some kind of like power yoga. Like you'll like it. And I was like, okay, fuck it. So I went and I loved it because it was a total workout. And that's why I went. Like I left feeling like my entire body was like worked. I sweat. But I was like, I had this feeling. And it's something I can't describe because if I try to describe my yoga practice in words, it never works. Like it's just sounds weird.
Well, I like hearing. This is interesting because I think there's probably so many people who would love to figure out how to get into it, but kind of don't. Maybe they feel like they have to be where you are now to be into it.
Yeah,
but where you were
not.
when you were getting into it was a very different spot.
Yeah, I like these poses were challenging for me. They were new to me, so it was a good thing for me to like each time feel as if I was getting better in these poses and then learning arm balances. I remember it being so like magical. Like I would see teachers do these, even just like crow, side crow. I'd be like, oh my God, I just got mesmerized by it. And then I would go and practice at home until I got it. And I was like, oh, this is kind of just like smoke and mirrors. Like this is doable. And once I started understanding that, I started getting into more of that. But anyways, I had this feeling when I left, like, it wasn't just a workout, it was something else. And then not too long into that practice, because I got obsessed and I would go all the time, stuff started happening where I was like thinking about like past just experiences like would like bubble up to the surface. Like I would think about stuff that happened to me in childhood and I was like, what is going on? Like stuff about my dad, like just things that I've gone through, like, and I was like, I don't know why this yoga practice is bringing up like all of these other things. So I got curious and I just wanted to know more. And because I had my own business and I didn't have to like give a month notice to go on a week vacation. I was like, I started looking online because I didn't know anything about what a teacher training was, what a yoga teacher training was. And I just started Googling it because this is back in like 2010. Which there wasn't much around here then still. It was kind of still like a new thing. I found this studio out of Pittsburgh that was leading a teacher training in Costa Rica, and all of it sounded amazing to me. I was like, I get to go to Costa Rica, practice yoga for a week, and get a certification and learn whatever. I was like, fuck it, I'm going. And I think it was like 3 weeks later. So I just closed out my books, bought the ticket, went. I didn't know a single like I was more excited than nervous. But I remember like I knew nothing about the philosophy of yoga. Like I bought a book at Barnes and Noble that was just called Yoga. And I like brought it on my plane and I think I probably read like 2 pages, but I like felt like I was doing something. I was like, okay. And as I was reading it, I was like, what am I getting into? Because I knew nothing about that stuff. All I knew was like I was good at this practice physically. Like, I got this. So I go and the first day, like you do a lot of physical practice. It's probably like 4 or 5 hours of just like the physical practice each day, and then it's like all this other stuff that you do. Am I going on a tangent?
No.
Okay.
I was like looking at him like, can you imagine? I feel like
I like that, but like, so that part I was fine with, but there was certain things that like, you know, the teachers brought to my attention, like, oh, this is actually how you do it. Like I was actually getting like the good adjustments and anatomy cues, which I hadn't gotten before because I was going to like kind of like a gym style yoga. So then I had to like unlearn stuff I was doing and relearn it. And that kind of was like a blow to my ego because here I am. Yeah. Okay. And that was only my first 100. The way it was, it split up into 2 trainings. So I did one, and then 9 months later I did my second one. Got it. So like, but I started teaching after my first one because back then people weren't like requiring you to be 200 hour. They weren't even like, as long as you could like teach, didn't matter.
Yeah.
Got it.
So I mean, I don't
even be like pretty awkward and not good at it probably.
Like all the other instructors at the one studio I was teaching at like didn't even have any kind of certification. Yeah. So anyways, I'm on this fucking training, and that's where I got introduced to meditation. Like really, really legit meditation. And I just remember the first time they actually had us do a day of silence. So it was like halfway through the week, and it was the night after the night practice, and they told us that night, they're like, just so you guys know, after we're done talking, you're not talking for another 24 hours. Wow. Like, no, like, you can't do anything, like, silence, like, you're going to wear a thing tomorrow, because there was other people at this resort, so you have to, like, wear in silence, right? And you can't even, like, make eye contact with them, like no kind of smiling, no music, no writing, no reading. Everything is like, wow, desensitized, right? So I was like it just, all this like fear and like kind of like anger. I was like, what in the fuck? Yeah. Just swept over me. But at the same time, I was like excited for the experience, but it was the most challenging thing I'd ever done up until that point. So the way they had us come out of the silence was through like a 45-minute meditation, and at the end of it, and it was so challenging, but that's what really like welcomed me into this other world of yoga that I didn't know about. So I fell in love with the physical part, which everyone needs. Like, you know, there's many doors to yoga. We all take a different route there, and that was definitely mine. So, and I cried a lot there. I think I cried like the most I'd ever cried in my entire life, because I'm very much like, my guard is up, like I'm good, I'm a hard ass, like I don't fuck with me. Like I was, if you guys think I'm like that now, I was like 20 times worse then. So it just opened me up to a lot of stuff. And like I left with lifelong friendships with, something changed, something shifted, and it wasn't just me that knew it. Like as soon as I got back, everyone wanted to know what I did. All my clients, they were so intrigued, and like because I was talking about it, so many of my clients doing hair are still my clients in yoga. That's handful of them have done my teacher trainings, have taken my teacher training. So it's so cool. Like they weren't even practitioners, and just to see that happen just because of my excitement after coming back. So then I fell in love with like the actual yoga practice, which is whole, so like the asana, which is the physical practice, the pranayama, the breathing, the breath work, and then the meditation.
That's really cool.
So I don't know. And then after that, I was like, I just need this to be my life. I don't know in what capacity, but like I was so, I don't want to say obsessed, but like it just took over my life. I didn't look for it. I didn't try to get it. It just happened to me.
So part of the most amazing story of all of this part in my brain is it wasn't like you signed up for an intro thing. You're like, I'm going to go to Costa Rica. Like that was I think I'm kind of curious. So like, let's go to Costa Rica and figure this out, which I think is something that so many people, we just had, recently we had a workshop. We had a bunch of people who were kind of diving into business. And you could tell everybody's like just putting their pinky toe in the water of a lot of their ideas of like, I kind of want to do this, but I'm kind of bashful, or I shouldn't invest in this. And we can tell quickly in the clients we work with and the people we work with that when somebody's ready to go and they jump in, they're like, no, I'm about to get real serious about this. The good stuff usually happens after that. It's almost this thing of not the training is important, or that first, whatever that whatever comes as a result of that investment is important, but just looking at yourself and saying, okay, I was curious and now I'm going to like really jump into this and see where it goes. Super cool. What do you think, because you've owned a business and dove deep into the world of yoga, I always think of business as a self-development practice, that it develops you or it brings up things about you that maybe would be easier to hide if you didn't own a business. Talk about how those things are similar. Talk about how maybe the experience of going through and jumping into yoga, learning about yourself. How is business the same way for you?
Well, I like this saying, like, you can't do something in one part of yourself. You have to do it in all of yourself. So, like, what is the other thing that I say? I can't even think about it. I'll be back with that.
Oh, you say a thing. How you do anything is how you do everything?
Yeah. Oh, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So it all feeds into each other, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I was already running my hair business before I opened the studio.
Yeah.
So I had that knowledge of, like, what it was like to run a business, but I had never had employees or anything like that. So then I went into that world.
Yeah. So if, like, owning a business makes you face things about yourself, yoga probably does that too. Or while you were, like, you talking about crying, like, you have to face shit that you've been like, oh, I've never had to face this before. How, and I think Adam was just like, how are the two similar? How is, like, owning a business similar to any personal development that someone seeks out? And the first thing I thought of was, like, everything from your past or your childhood that influences the way you lead someone or the way you interact with a human being, I think surfaces the minute you own a business and have to have employees, because you're like, oh, I was raised to, like, always completely ignore this thing, and I can't do that right now.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I resonated with it.
Yeah.
But just to give timeline then, so 2010 was when you went to Costa Rica?
Yeah, well, I can say something about that.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Because I don't want people just to listen to this and be like, oh, well, she did it because she had to and she's passionate about it, because they think it's hard. Some people don't even know what their passion is, right? And, like, I didn't know that I was going to be passionate about yoga until I tried. So I think people just need to, like, if they have a little tiny little thing of curiosity, they have to just try something, and you're not going to know until you try it. And you can't map out your whole life from now until 5 years, like, oh, if I do this thing and then 5 years later here's where I'm going to be, like, no, because you might hate that thing, and it might take you might try it, you hate it, but it leads you to something else, and that's the thing you end up loving, but you're never going to find that thing unless you try the thing that you hate. So I just think it's so important. I have the neon sign at my new space. It says stay curious, because if you're not curious, like, and then you're not trying new things, then what are you doing, you know? Yeah. And you're not going to know. That's why I really, when people say, where will you be in 5 years? I have no idea. I really don't. And I'm okay with that, because a part of me gets excited about that. Yeah. Another part of me, it's scary, but it's like, I don't know. I mean, anything could happen in those 5 years. So I think it's good to, like, leave that space for curiosity, for something to take you on a different road than you think you're going to be, and you think it's going to make you happy. So I think just do. Like, you're not going to know until you just do something.
Yeah.
And probably a lot of people set out those goals of, like, in 5 years, 10 years, and make their decisions to meet that expectation that you made way before it ever happened. So, like, in that same way with, like, you signing up to go to Costa Rica is like, this is going to possibly lead me somewhere else. But if you had set this goal of owning a hair salon with 20 employees, you would have had that friction of, like, how does this fit together when it doesn't need to? And maybe for some people it does. But yeah, I like that answer.
Yeah, and I had to learn by having employees. Like, I had to fuck up a lot of times to learn, like, oh, I can't, this is not the way to approach this. But the only way I was going to learn, I couldn't read it in a book. I had to experience it. I had to feel it, just like my yoga practice. Like, you have to go through it. You can't just, like, there's no easy way out. You have to work through the hard times. Like, there's, like, I think people think that, like, I get up and I just do all this yoga every day and it's, like, la-di-da and it's so great. Like, your yoga practice it will constantly make you see yourself in the mirror, right? Like, on your mat every time you go. And now, like, I don't think of my practice as ever stopping or starting. I'm kind of always in my practice at this point. It doesn't matter if I'm physically doing it or if I'm doing my breath work or meditation. It's like, this to me is a yoga practice, having this connection with you guys. So everything I do, it's making me see my shit. And some days it's awesome and some days it's awful. And there was times a few years ago where I was like, I hate this. Like, I don't want to do this anymore because the business side of it was taking away my love of the physical practice. So I had to go through that. It's the same thing with owning a business. Yeah. Like, there's going to be really awesome days. There's going to be awful days. Yeah. But it's moving through those awful days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you started that studio, but now you have your own private studio. So talk us through that journey of being like, okay, I love yoga, but I'm going to change the context in which I own a business, or some of those things. Like, what was the journey like up until that point?
Yeah, so this is an interesting story because I opened a yoga studio without even being a yoga teacher for a year. And when I first started, I was like, what am I doing? Like, people are going to judge me. Other yoga instructors that have been teaching for 20 years are going to be like, what is this chick doing? Why does she think she can do this? And I'm sure there are people that did think that. But I had to get past that. I had to be like, okay, I don't care. When really I did care, you know? There was a part of me that did, obviously.
You have to move forward in spite of.
I just had to do it. And I was like, here I am, this chick that's going to open a studio. I literally have not been teaching for a year, and it wasn't my main focus. So then I jumped into business owner, studio owner, boss. Yeah. And that was a whole other thing because my salon was my own thing. Yeah, I owned the business, but it was just me as my employee. So not only was my attention going to all the other stuff and worrying about, okay, how many people are coming? What are we going to do? Like, let's facilitate this event, because I was doing like all the marketing and trying to build stuff up. It was right when social media was like at its, you know, it was like the intro into it for me. Yeah. It wasn't really that hyped up yet. So I didn't have like a huge following just to like post stuff and have people come. I had to like get in the community, and I would go to a coffee shop and be like, can I teach here? Can I do a class here? And then people found out about it through that. And then that's how the word came out. But anyways, along with that, I decided to do, I think it was a year into owning the studio, not even, I moved to New York for 6 months because I wanted more training. I was like, I feel like I know nothing. Like, once you do a teacher training and you're really passionate about yoga, like, all I want to do is learn. I can't tell you how much money I've spent on workshops and traveling and teacher trainings. I've done 2 200-hour teacher trainings. I've done 1 500-hour teacher training. I've done 30-hour intensives. I've done all these fucking workshops with teachers all over the world, and I still feel like I am barely scratching the surface. So I'm not here being like, I am the shit because I've done this and that. Like, I'm just so intrigued and curious about this practice, because it is like, when people say, oh, like, I think people have an idea that yoga is one thing, and it's everything. It's many things. It comes in every shape and size and whatever. I did that because I needed to learn. I needed to be a student again. And it was when I was there that first time that I was like, okay, I'm really glad I opened the studio, but what did I do? Like, I want to just be a teacher for a while. But I came back and I did it. I led my first teacher training.
How did the studio, you had people running it, or did you like shut down
I did
shop?
everything on like my end as far as like paying for stuff, and I still did the Instagram and all that stuff. I had a manager that I paid like a little bit extra. If she was one of the instructors, I paid a little extra every week just to make sure like the place didn't burn down. There wasn't really much, like, she did things, and I'm so thankful for her, but like it was hard for me too, because I like to be I'm not good at like doing projects with people. I'm either going to be the one that doesn't do anything or takes over and does everything,
but like splitting it's hard.
Like, I'm an artist, so I like to, like, it's my vision, I want it to be my vision. So it's hard for me. People will be like, well, just delegate. I'm like, yeah, but then I just feel like I'm doing twice the work. So like, they would do it and then I'd have to redo it. And it's not that they did it bad, it's just that they didn't do it the way that I would do it. So it was when I was there that I knew this wasn't going to be a forever thing. And I didn't open it thinking it was going to be a forever thing, but I just knew. I was like,
in New York confirmed
really
that.
Feel like I need to be free of like these 4 walls and being in charge of people, because when I was in charge of people, it put this extra like layer of stress, and that I just, I know anything you do, you're going to have stress, but I just didn't like that. I didn't want that. Especially, it's not like you're cooking a recipe where you can be like, add these ingredients. You're working with people that are doing something from their heart and soul. And when you're trying to give people feedback, it's just a really weird place to be in. So I knew then, So I came back and I did a teacher training, and I still knew, but I knew that like it would come when the time was right. And once Melissa started teaching and she took over like manager roles, and I was like kind of seeing that she could definitely do this, I had to plant the seed to her like, hey, have you thought about owning a studio? And she's like, no. And she's like, I don't want to ever own a studio. I was like, okay. And then like a month later I'd be like, hey, so have you thought about owning a studio? And she'd be like, no. And then like a month later I'd say the same thing, and I'd be like, you do realize you're doing everything to own a studio. Yeah. You're just not the title of owner.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh. And I was like, listen. So I really, at that point, I was like, I thought I was either going to sell her the studio or the doors were going to close. Yeah. Because I didn't want to sell it to just like
anyone.
Like some rich dude in town that has money that can take it over. That was not my vision. I didn't want to keep it alive that way.
Yeah.
So when she was like, oh my God, yeah, that's when I was like, okay, this is the person. So I kind of like put it out there, quote unquote, in the universe years prior, and then it happened. Yeah. So
you didn't like spring it on her the week before. You're like, well,
no,
I'm gonna close.
It was a process.
Yeah.
It was a process.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Because I just wanted to be a student for a while, and I wanted to travel more and teach.
Yeah.
And I don't think, this thing that I'm doing now, it's not going to be a forever thing. It's just a thing right now that I'm doing and I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
So, and I'm still able to travel.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm still able to just be in charge of myself right now.
Right.
And I'm not going to say I'll never own a business again or have employees, because I think that will probably happen to some capacity. I don't know what, but I'll come into it with new eyes, like with a better insight, because I've had to go through all this stuff and learn it the hard way.
Yeah. How like often or how much were you still involved with the studio then as it transitioned? Like you still teach open classes?
Yeah, and I actually took a step away from that because I knew I had to step away for a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's when I was traveling a lot from like January, February, March, April, May, June. And then I realized that I was like, I don't want to travel this much. It actually is making me crazy.
Yeah.
So I had to learn that the hard way too. Like, I don't want to be away from my dog that long. I really like home. Like, so now what I'm doing is I'm going to the places I love, to where my teachers are at, like cities I really want to go to. So right now I'm focusing more on just New York, Chicago, and like closer cities to Columbus that I can drive to. So I still go to Cincinnati, Cleveland. I'll go to Yellow Springs in November.
Oh, that's cool.
So and then eventually I'll want to move to like West Coast. I just haven't made those connections yet, but I don't just want to go everywhere and be everything for everyone. I just want to take care of myself along the way, because there was a while that I wasn't taking care of myself.
Yeah.
And I let that part go, which is like, why would people want to take yoga from me when I'm not doing what I need to do for me? Yeah. So I have to every day, and that's where like the whole thing with letting go of the studio, for a long time I didn't want to, because it was like, but I'm a yoga studio owner and everybody knows me as this, and I have to be this thing. And that's what it was for hair. Like, I'm a hairstylist. Every party I go to, like, here's Josie, the hairstylist. Let's talk about hair, blah, blah, blah. And it was, Josie's the owner of Thank. This is who people knew me. Like, that's how people knew me. Yeah. And I was scared to let that go, but non-attachment, in yoga, like, I had to really practice that. Like, why is it that I can't let go?
Yeah.
And really, so that was like that whole practice of just being able to be like, I'm letting this go.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, that's like something I struggle with in what will people know me as this. So if you ever change your mind, or if you want to like, start over, like where does that leave you? And I think something that you've done well is communicate about the whole being through social media or like in person when you talk to people. And it isn't just you sharing like, oh, do this pose on your Instagram. It's like very much shows you as a 3-dimensional person. And I see a lot of people pivot way too hard into their business and making their account all about that. It's like, where does that leave them flexibility wise with maybe they wake up and they don't want to do that anymore. Yeah. And so being a human being is something that's so powerful in letting yourself try a lot of different things and sharing about it. Yeah.
What do you think has been the there's probably not a lot of people who are 33 who have had the chance to own a couple of businesses, have employees, have some where they don't have employees. what would you say, let's go to the like having a team employees thing. What would you say is the thing that surprised you about being inside of that world? I could imagine a person listening here who was like, oh yeah, someday I'm going to have 22 employees. Like
being a boss?
Yeah.
Yeah, what was the thing you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect this part of it?
Yeah. Honestly, there was a part of it I loved, right?
Yeah.
And which is like why I probably will go that route again and be, you know, an owner of whatever business where I do have employees, is that connection with people and just having them trust me, I guess. I even have this tattoo that says mom, and I love my mom, but it wasn't for my mom. It's like partly, but that's my nickname is Mom. So everybody that's like done my teacher trainings, they call me Mom, and people that work for me, it's like, oh, Mom's here, you know? So, and that's why I get so like, I put everything into what I'm doing. Like I can't half-ass anything. I'm a perfectionist. And so if I don't feel like it's going to be perfect, I have to be like, okay, I'm going to go away. So I really did feel like I did a lot of good in like connecting with my, like the instructors and stuff. Like, I don't know. I just saw them, evolve as teachers, and I love that, and I love seeing, that's why I love leading like the teacher trainings, is just seeing that evolution of people just to like use their voice and teach yoga and do something they love and like watch it like flourish. So I don't know, that's the part I really loved about it. The other part that was hard is just I really think it's good to like set yourself up, and I'm sure people go into businesses like this. It's like, you don't have to do everything. I just did the mistake of thinking I could. So, you know, I was even doing payroll every week. And even though it didn't take me a long time, it was still in the back of my head, like, okay, I still have to do this thing before I do this thing. And like, there's little tasks like that where it doesn't require your like creative side, like giving those away for people to do. So that you're not stuck with this overwhelming feeling of I have everything to do. Even though it's like things that seem like, I know a lot of business owners are like, oh, I just do all this stuff because I can. It's like, well, maybe you can, but I think it might be better if somebody else did. And I think you guys do a good job at that, because you have really great people working for you that, yeah, you could do stuff that they're doing, but it's better when you have other people's visions and whatever.
Or to understand what we've had to figure out is, and we say this all the time, this podcast wouldn't happen if Michael wasn't here doing it. The fact that we can sit down and like the mics are ready and we're just like have a great conversation. I think the conversations would feel different if we were also like, oh my gosh, like how are we going to find time to edit this and stuff like that. And so
I've done that. I've like recorded episodes with people that have never gone up online because like I just got way too stuck in the editing or something.
Publishing it,
I can know for a fact we could do all of it, except it would not happen for sure. Definitely.
For sure.
Exactly. So when you go into something and you're thinking like, oh, well, I can't because you have to do all this stuff. It's like, but write down what you could actually give away, you know, and think outside the box. Like the people that do like check-ins at the studio, for a long time I was doing it all, and I was like, I can't afford to pay people, but people need free yoga, so let's get them to check in, and then they can practice for free. And what's another person in a class that has only 6 people anyways? Like, like just thinking outside the box with stuff.
Right. True. Was it hard to manage people? Like, so we've never really had it where the people who work for us also like work at other places like this. So you probably, did you have instructors, yoga teachers who also taught elsewhere? Was it hard to not have everyone only focus on your studio, or do you feel like that's the magical part of the community?
Definitely instructors taught at other places, because realistically you can't really teach at one place and make enough money, and a lot of the instructors had like day jobs too, you know. It takes a certain kind of person that's going to give up that just to focus on teaching. I think I only had a few that were just solely teachers. If not just one. So I didn't care, because it's like,
that's how it is.
Like they teach the way they're going to teach at each place. It is going to be a little, if it's going to feel a little different, it might not be a different class, but if you go and take an instructor over here, it's going to feel different than here, just because of the community and the space that's that was created around Think. And I think Think is and was like a really unique space that people could say like it has its own vibe. and I think there was room for everything. Like, I never tried to get everybody to practice at Think because it wasn't for everyone.
Yeah.
There's room for all these other studios,
Yeah.
you know? Like, and why would I want to try to make somebody go to my place if they didn't want to? It was crazy. So there's just, the more I saw it was, there was hardly anything when I opened up. And now there's so much more, but that means more people are practicing. Yeah. And we get a lot of people coming from other studios that, and because I do the same thing. I literally, when I travel, I've probably practiced hundreds of studios, right? And I love that because I can get a flavor from each place. So why would I tell people to go to one place?
Just one, yeah.
Like, I tell people, I'm like, I literally tell my students when they go on my teacher training, like, go take Ashtanga, go to this studio, go try this, go take Kundalini. Because if you're just seeing something from one lens, it's not going to do you the best it can do you. You know what I mean? Like take as much.
Yeah.
And maybe you go somewhere else and you find that that's actually a better fit for you than Think. And awesome.
Yeah.
Truth.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about? So part of what, like, the topic of this podcast is below the surface. What were some strengths that you had, maybe just in personality or an experience, that let you be successful? And success being however you would like to define that. It doesn't have to be like,
so
what do you bring to the table?
I will say that I'm just like a connector. Like, I don't know what it is, but for some reason people like being around me, I think sometimes. So when I was doing hair, I knew that it wasn't just because I was doing good hair that people came to me. They liked coming and having a conversation with me because I genuinely like having conversations with people. And I genuinely, when I ask people questions, want to hear the answers. I don't ask questions that I don't want to hear the answer. I will sit and talk to anybody all day long and ask them questions, and I think it weirds people out sometimes because they're like, why are you, it's really intimate. I'm like, but tell me everything. So I've always been curious and a question asker, right? So there's that, and then that's how it was when I was like checking into classes. I think when I first opened, I was able to get to know that first wave of clients that were coming in because I was able to talk to them at the beginning of class, and then that kind of went away because I wasn't checking in, so I wasn't having those conversations, and then I started really missing that, which is why I love doing the one-on-ones because I have that connection back, which is great. But moving back to that, so many relationships have been formed at Think. People that have gotten engaged, people that are dating, best friends, people that have moved away together, so, and it's not just through the instructors, it's check-in people, it's clients, it's all of it. So just watching that and me stepping away, and I'm not like, I did that, but just seeing all of these relationships that have formed through that space, that community, that is enough for me to be like, cool.
I'm glad I'm glad I had a
So for some reason that is my strength.
I think that's one of the things that's fascinating because I don't think if somebody was going through your Instagram account, that's not something that they could understand. Yeah. And I think there's so much of, we've helped other studios in the city brand themselves. Yeah. And we're always helping studios remember you will not be like another studio because you're not that person. You're not those people. So much of what we're trying to do with this season of the podcast is even give business owners or aspiring business owners permission to be like, Josie has a weird strength, so I can't be like her because she's her. But I probably have a weird strength too that I can use and be like me.
Totally.
Which I think is freeing, and also, you learn that there's a lot going on behind the scenes with everybody.
What emotions did you feel as you left owning Think Yoga Studio?
Everything. It was the hardest time of my life. I was actually dating someone at the time. We're not together anymore, but he was really there for me a lot. I was like a fucking... I'm sorry that I'm cussing so much. Can we do explicit on this episode?
We do, and then it's fun because we get a little explicit.
So he was so good for me because I was coming home every day okay, I'm going to sell it. And then by the end of the day, I was like, no, I can't. And then the next day I'm like, I'm not going to sell it. I'm going to do it. And then I'd be like, okay, I'm going to sell it. And he's like, okay, you have to decide. Because it was so hard. It was not easy. Because I was so invested in it. Yeah. But I think it was kind of for the wrong reasons too, you know? So I just decided, I was like, okay, I'm doing this. And I remember I wanted to tell all my instructors first before word got out and like everybody knew. So I had like a get together with everyone and I told them and I just started bawling. I was like, this is what's happening. Yeah. And, you know, some people weren't that excited about it and some people were really happy for me. And that's what it is. Like, you have to understand anything you do, any business you own, you are not going to make everybody happy. Yeah. So you might as well stop trying. And that's what I was doing for so long. I was like, how can I do this and still make everybody love me and happy? Like, not happening. So I had to let that go. So it was emotional. It was very hard. But it was everything. It was happy. It was sad. It was, I went through all the things. Yeah.
I feel like when I exited Death to the Stock Photo, for me, and everyone's different, which is why I'm even telling this story, is I felt a lot of tension before deciding. And the minute I decided, which was like 2 a.m, laying in bed, and I like woke Adam up and I'm like, hey, I'm going to leave. Yeah. I'm going to, not obviously not our marriage or our business, but I'm going to leave this other company.
I was like,
I'm going to leave.
Right now?
And he was like, are you sure? And I'm like, yep. And I like was so at peace and I like went to sleep.
I just still remember you said yep. And it was like, it was so much, so much conflict within you. And then you said released. Yep, and then it was like, I kept checking in with her, being like, hey, are you still sure? Like,
you know. I was like, oh yeah, I feel awesome.
Yeah, I said
but
yep.
I think
she's like, I said yep.
It'll feel different for everyone when they decide that this isn't like what they want to keep doing. And some people will, like I remember Adam felt a lot of conflict in my decision of like weighing pros and cons after I was decisive. And I was like, oh, I'm not debating this anymore. Yeah. And I think some people will still feel that like back and forth, and all of it is normal. None of it is like, you know, you should leave this business you started because you feel this way. Everyone's personality will lead them to a different feeling. And when I told my co-founder in Mission Coffee, it was like him talking, and I'm like, hey, I just have to tell you that like my heart's not in this anymore. Yeah. And he was like, the first thing he said was cool. Not like cool that your heart's not in it, but we had kept our communication so open that he was like, you have to do what you have to do, you know?
You guys had like...
And that's what I found too. Go ahead.
No, you and David had when we covered this we had him on an episode of the podcast. But
Season 1,
yeah. Yeah, they had like the greatest business split up of human history. It
wasn't no drama. But it also, you know, when you leave a business that's successful, it financially costs that business money. And you have to think about, I don't want this to go under because I'm leaving. I don't want to demand more money or... require like a bigger payout. And you balance, when you care about the business, you balance like its best interest versus like being selfish with
it. You care about the business owner. Yeah. Right? It's like, I'm trying to make his life easy. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And I'm sure you felt the same way, where you don't want to hand over something to Melissa, who owns it now, and make it feel like worse off. No. Like, you want to make that transition so
even though peaceful. You built it, and so you feel like some right to it. Yeah. But all at the same time, you're like, I care about her and I want her to be successful. So how do I... It's a weird thing of like handing off a thing that feels like your baby probably, or something. Yeah.
But I felt the same way, where like after leaving, I did help out with some creative work, but I was like, you know, I'm not going to continue like taking photos for, you know, I had to step back a little bit and let it become what it is, and like without me. So when I saw that, like, oh, maybe they redesigned their website, I was like, that's good. Like, it needs to be what it is without me now.
Yeah, and I just think that as soon as you start to get, or as soon as I start to get like bored and like, okay, not challenged, I guess, because there came a point where I was like, okay, now what? And for me, I always have to like explore new things. So that's why I knew I had to go. Same thing with hair. But as soon as I sent that email for my hair, more people were super supportive than not. Same thing with the studio. It's like, you just have to like, you have to take care of yourself first. Yeah. And like honor that. And then whatever happens.
Good stuff comes.
As long as you know you're doing it in the best way that you can. Yeah. That's all that matters.
Well, and Brene Brown talks a lot about the idea of, you know, specific people's feedback is important, but I remember taking away so much of, if someone who doesn't own their own business or invest a lot of their passion and energy into something is giving me feedback, I don't really care. You aren't there doing that. Like, I'll
talk about that too. Yeah. When I was doing hair and I started talking to my clients about me opening a studio, I got like 50-50, like what? Because of course they didn't want me to stop doing hair.
Yeah.
They wanted me to keep doing their hair.
Yeah.
And then the other 50 were like, that's awesome, you should do it. So I was always torn. And then I decided, I was like, I can't tell people. Like, I can't tell people this. So then when I decided to sell the studio, I kept it so quiet.
Yeah.
And that's why it came as a surprise to so many people, because I was like, I don't want anyone else's opinion to get into my head.
I
like,
can make this decision.
Yeah, this is my decision. It's not influenced by this random person over here thinking it's dumb. Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. And I remember other studio owners right away were like, how could you sell your studio? Like, isn't it like your baby? Like, I'm like, actually, no, because I don't have a baby. And that's, no, if I'm thinking of this as this is like, I'm so attached and I can't live without it, like, that's kind of not healthy.
It's not healthy,
like, so I just remember thinking that, like, no, it's absolutely not my baby.
Yeah.
Like,
it's grown up.
What do you, what do you think it was like, so you kind of chose or talked Melissa into it or helped her see that. What was it like handing it off?
I hypnotized her.
Yeah. You're like, we're going to do some specific meditations today. It's like, imagine yourself owning this studio.
I have this weird
Imagine how happy you are. What do you think it would have been like if it was different than that? Like if you had done it and it was somebody who you weren't sure how they were going to handle it or treat it or take care of it?
It wouldn't have been that way.
Just wouldn't have happened.
You would have probably shut it down.
It would not have been that way.
Yeah. No. So you'd have shut it down instead of, or you would have just kept doing it.
I can't say for certain, but like I wasn't going to have some rich business guy come in and buy it. Like it just wasn't. Nice. It didn't feel right. Maybe if I owned an online business training course for something, that would feel right. This was like a emotional thing, right?
Gotcha, yeah.
It's just different.
Yeah.
So it just didn't make sense for me to sell it to somebody that didn't have their heart and soul invested into it. Not that it's their baby, that they could still give it away maybe. Yeah. But like, I wasn't interested.
Yeah.
I really wasn't.
Yeah. So this made me think of a question because the whole theme of Below the Surface is like things that I don't think people tend to ask or talk about because a lot of small business communities just like to be like, yeah, hustle, it's hard work, but it's so rewarding. This is like a very technical question, but how did you struggle with still owning the name Thank Yoga, having a studio that you don't own anymore called Thank Yoga Studio? Like, was there a lot of strategy behind it? Were you like clear about you still using it as your brand name? How did that was that like I don't know what the word is. Was it like a no-brainer of how you would proceed?
Yeah. That I just feel like that space, it is Thank Yoga Studio, right? Mm-hmm. So, and there's so many things that I'm just kind of like known now for Thank Yoga. Mm-hmm. Like people seem to be like, "Are you Thank Yoga?" I'm like, "Yeah,
that's sure." My name.
So I wanted to keep that because I love that, and I just love the whole brand, and I have so much other stuff, and I won't get into it where I want to take that brand, which is like not about the physical yoga practice. So I know that I'm doing more stuff with my brand, but like I love that that's what the heartbeat is that studio. You know, whether she moves locations, like that's kind of like pumping blood into everything else still, no matter if I don't live here anymore or whatever, like it's like the soul of it.
Yeah. The most amazing thing I think of as far as all of us being connected, because we were aware of each other for a while, but Melissa actually came to a workshop we had probably 3 years ago, and she was doing something completely different and kind of thinking about getting out of it. And then all of that happened with you guys, and that years passed, and it was just really cool to see her come out of those years doing something like that seemed like such a great fit. And I think we get to see so many of those journeys happen. Like we get to see in 2013 when we started, people talking about like, oh, I'm at a job I don't love, and now they like own their own business and love it. And so it takes time, and it's all literally below the surface happening, but then it
well, here's the other thing though. I think that everything we're doing is just leading us to what we're doing. So hair was leading me to this. Like I couldn't have done the studio without doing hair first for 10 years. You know what I'm saying? Like everything taught me what I needed to know to get to the next place.
Yep.
What Melissa was doing with you guys was a social media thing, which now she runs a social for Thanks. So it's like everything that she did and thought she was doing was just leading her to what she's doing now. So like, and I think people get stuck in like, oh, I just wasted a bunch of years, even with like dating someone, or they get stuck in that, oh, I wasted, so I can't. It's like, no, you just learn not to date an asshole again. You just learn that this isn't the job you want. You want to work for yourself, but you like have tools to take with you. So it's your choice to like think it's a waste or just take the things you learned and move on and like understand that you can't go back to the past. Like here we are in the present. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. So let's focus on what's here and go with it.
Yeah. And be thankful for all the moments.
And understand that everything was bringing you to this point.
Yeah. Okay. So the last question that I want to ask is a little bit more general, but I think you'll like resonate with how you want to answer it. If someone is feeling that curiosity that your sign in your space says stay curious, what would you say, like what advice would you give them? Nothing like, oh, go onto Google and type in what should I do? Actually, that would be amazing. I wonder what the results would be. But what would you say, like what should they be listening to within themselves? Like what do you feel like would be your last piece of advice?
For anyone just wanting to start a business or sell a business?
Just feeling curious, like feeling like you said, you get bored.
Yeah.
What should they do? And this could be like 3 tangible answers, 1 big life-giving question or answer, whatever.
Well, I think it's really good, even if they're feeling like I'm curious, but I don't know what I'm curious about, is like try something completely new. So I realized a couple years into owning the studio that all I was doing was practicing yoga. And I was like, I need to get out of my head. I need to get out of this space. I'm just so in it. Like, so then I started, I took up boxing and I was like so bad at it, but I loved that because it got my brain thinking in a different way. It got me moving in a different way. So that when I went to boxing, eventually that was it kind of became my yoga.
Yeah.
And so I understood, like, it doesn't have to be just me on my mat practicing. It became something else. So I think that's really good. Also, like, doing something you're not used to doing. Like, go rock climbing. Even if it's something, like, a little bit, you're scared to do it, whatever. Go do something completely out of the norm from what you're doing. Because, A, you're going to meet new people. And you might meet the one person that's going to be like, oh, I know this person that I can connect you with. Do it by yourself. I think a lot of us... if you can. A lot of us are like, I need a friend to go with and I need to convince my friend and then I'll go. It's like, just do something where you don't know anyone. Like, you don't ever have to show up again if you don't want to, but you're going out of your comfort zone. Like, take a painting class, even if you suck at it, because it's going to make your brain think in other ways. Like, don't stay where you're good. And that's what I say in yoga too. It's like, we have, people that are really backbendy, they're going to backbend all the time because they're super good at it. It's like, that's not serving you. You're just going to become too flexible. You're going to break in half. Like, you want strength, you want flexibility, you want everything, you want that balance. So it's the same thing with doing other stuff. Like, you have to go where you're not good to then maybe see like, oh, I can sharpen this tool a little bit. Maybe I can get good at this, or maybe it's going to lead me somewhere I had no idea. But our brains get so stuck thinking the same thing. It's good to shake it up in a different way.
Truth.
Yeah.
Fact.
So good.
It reminds me of this book that I read because I talked to Josie one time.
The Bhagavad Gita?
Yeah. So the Gita was like one of the characters in it. I'm trying to explain it for like people who don't know anything about it. One of the characters in it, it's a dialogue between 2 people. And so one of the characters in it is named Krishna, who's like the wise super person, right? Telling normal person like the truth about life. But he talks about the difference between contemplation and mindful action. And he says mindful action is the preferred path towards enlightenment. So doing things intentionally and reflecting on them and learning more about yourself and the world. But if you can't handle that, then contemplation is great. Essentially this whole thing of go become like a monk and hide out in the desert for your whole life to become enlightened. But the better path is to be engaged and dialed in and do something, learn about it, reflect, get better, change. The less evolve.
Obvious path.
Yeah, which I thought was cool.
Yeah.
I've so much resonated with that in my own story.
Yeah.
So anyways, I thought of you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because I read that because of you.
Cool.
And I just finished it up, which is cool. So I got
Yay.
to figure out the next thing to read.
Yeah.
thank you. This was cool. This was very fun.
Thank you guys.
We didn't know a lot of the details that you shared in this.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
fun.
I
think people are going to really resonate with understanding that this is, I mean, ultimately people listen to our podcast and they're like, these business owners are just people. And not in like a, diss on all of us, but like, that's true. Like, we're all figuring it out. And so many people can resonate with people's stories and not feel alone. And that's the ultimate goal. So much of my goal in the world is to demystify that. To be like, oh, you think Thank Yoga's super cool. She's trying to figure out what she's doing. It's like, she is really cool, but
she's just done some stuff.
Yeah,
and she'll
it's
tell
the
you about
action
it.
part.
If people want to jump in, learn more, do a Google search of Thank Yoga. Or
that's
you have
the
that
website.
name on all the accounts.
Thank Yoga Instagram. I'm leading a teacher training in January, so if anyone out there is wanting to be a yoga teacher, holler.
How many people go attend but don't
become a teacher? I would say like 70%, because a lot of people are just doing. I mean, no, 70% become teachers.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people go into it not thinking they're going to be teachers because they think that they aren't going to be good or something, and I'm like, just you wait.
Yeah.
But some people just do it for to have a better understanding of the practice, and it's really good for anyone. You don't have to want to be a teacher.
Yeah.
It's such a good like transformative space for you to like discover a lot about yourself, and we use the tools of yoga obviously to do that, but
if you're a small business and want to bring you in to do some like meditation, mindfulness,
even
like
a big
workshops.
business could do that.
Yes. Big businesses very much can do that.
If you work at a gigantic corporation,
bring Josie in.
Josie will still come help you.
And then one-on-ones you do in your space, which is I've done, and they're amazing. So check out Josie. Josie, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, you guys.
Yep. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
If you're still listening to this episode, you've made it till the end for our Q&A segment.
Congratulations and thank you.
Yeah, thank you for listening to the whole thing. Not everybody listens to the whole thing of things. Yeah,
a lot of people don't listen to the whole thing of things, for sure.
This is the part of the podcast where we like to just share two like listener submitted questions or audience participants in like our social media platforms, and they're related to business and or just ways in which we can kind of talk about things that people are actually curious about. So I'm going to share two questions. Both are from Tony from Instagram. And they're connected to me. They feel like they're a little connected. The first one is, how do you manage content releases? Do you plan out months in advance, or are some things released on a shorter timeline? Which I think is a great question.
It's an awesome question.
That's the first one.
Yeah.
You want to answer first?
I'll answer first. So I think, one, a lot of the stuff that we do is very, because it's our business and we're in it and it's us and we're thinking about it and we know what the plans are, it's very easy for us to, and it's our full-time thing, it's very easy for us to do things on the fly a little bit more than we would ever advise somebody else to do them.
For sure.
So if you look at what's easy for us is making graphics and photography and words and things like that. And so launching things is always, we can do that stuff pretty quickly.
Yeah. And we know our vision.
Yeah, we know our vision.
Yeah.
We've made, like when we launch and announce a podcast episode, we know what the content is. We can make the graphics for it. We can talk about it. We don't need somebody to like help us talk about it well.
Yeah.
Where other people might get really stuck on, how do I put words to explaining this?
What should it look like?
Yeah, so it's different for everybody. And not all of our clients do we advise them to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I would say when we were working with people, like our clients, to release things or to release content, we're definitely having the discussion as early as the idea is like in our brains. So if our client wants to launch a campaign, the minute they come up with it, we're already, our brains are already a little bit brainstorming. And then I think it's just figuring out based on the production of the stuff that you're releasing. Like if you're self-publishing a book, we always say have the book finished when you start mapping out your marketing plan. Don't be doing both at once. So create the stuff first and then decide how to roll it out. Don't be creating the content or the courses or the, website while you're thinking of how to share it.
Yeah. And we see that when we work with larger publishers on rolling out cookbooks and things like that. Like the book is finished for 6-9 months before it's available for sale.
Yeah.
Because there's this transition that happens, and it just depends on the scale of whatever you're launching. The thing is finished, and now you actually have to go do a lot of work marketing and building awareness and things like that, which takes almost a whole separate part of your brain. It's why you see movie studios finish a movie, and then the actors are like doing a year of interviews and promotion for the actual movie.
They're not like, well, we're filming right now while doing an interview.
It's like, hey, we finished this up last night, and then we're going to change, so like tomorrow it'll come out in theaters. Like there's a lot of, and so the bigger of scale that you have, and because, so for the Wonder Jam, we control a lot of that.
Yeah.
We're not relying on other people for it. Things can be a little bit more real time. But if you are, like a couple of our clients collaborate with vendors to put on a concert series, or the one of our clients, Pursuit, just launched their Columbus Crew partnership, and which has been something they've been working on for years. Like the details of what does it all look like. They had to go through, get everybody outfitted with custom suits, and then get it delivered and try it on, take photos, videos, and then launch it.
Yeah.
And so they had to fit into a bunch of people's schedules. And so there's a bunch of, the more people involved, the earlier you need to get started.
Yeah. And be flexible. Like, if you need to accommodate for another vendor or partnership, sometimes the timeline looks a little less ideal, and I think that's fine. But yeah, so that was a great question. The next one is, any suggestions for building excitement before an event? I do craft shows, knitting parties, and classes, and want to keep the momentum going after I initially announce the event, which is also something that we come up against all the time at the Wonder Jam. For me, I think really giving that event its own brand almost within your brand is something that's pretty strong. So if you're just sharing a random picture and promoting the event, I think it doesn't get imprinted in your audience's mind as strongly as if you had a design that specifically represented the style and the mood and the content of the event. I think the other thing is, really working with either the venue or other collaborators that are a part of the event can be huge. So you might be doing a knitting party, but can you invite a vendor doing food or a swag bag or someone else to co-host the event where you can really tap into their audience? I think is something that also makes it pretty strong.
Collaboration has always been huge for us. It's one of the things that when we get into moments where workshop signups aren't happening as frequently as normal, and we're like, oh, I wonder why that is. Typically, we find the more we can collaborate, or the more we can make it. Our events are like one-time things. It's not like we're recording them and putting them up on the internet just to be like, oh, you can like watch the same video. You don't need to be there.
Yeah.
Like you have to come to be there.
Right.
And the more we can help people feel like this is going to be an event or an experience. And so I would say, for Tony, if you're a type of person who you're not necessarily at your own events, you're at some other event. If you had a product line that is only available at that thing, or that only like the first 12 people that come through get a specific, item or something you're selling at a craft show, just being like, hey, this is the, I know like Midwest Craft Con is a thing. So be like, this product is only going to be available at the 2017 Midwest Craft Con, and I'm not selling it online after that. This is just for people who are here. And so the people who are your fans, who are excited to know about you and excited to show up, they'll show up and they'll go out of their way to get that thing.
Yep. So thanks for asking, Tony. If anyone else is curious about something that has to do with business, or maybe you have a question that you feel like nobody answers, you can email us at podcast@thewonderjam.com. You can direct message us on any social network, and we will see you next episode.